I will be discussing about European literature. Let me start by stating the learning objectives for this lesson. First, identify the characteristics of European literature. Second, distinguish the differences between works of literature from different literary periods, and finally demonstrate understanding of the evolution of European literature. This is going to be the topic outline for our discussion. Now let me start with the first period, which is the ancient period, which started from 800 BC to 500 AD. So during the ancient period, the literature created in the ancient period was mostly influenced by Greco-Roman culture, which became the basis for the Western literature that we know today. So the Greeks introduced all major kinds of literature, which includes tragedy, comedy, epic, history, biography, prose, narrative, lyrics, and satire. In this period, the earliest form of literature were oral in nature. Oral epics became materials for Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey, which expressed the values and imagination of the Western humanity, and were also used by the Greeks as models for conduct. Aside from Homer, major Greek writers during this period were Aesop, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and Sophocles. Some of the major Roman writers of this period were Horace, Virgil, and Ovid. So the next period is the Magibal Period, which is from 500 to 1500 AD. The medieval period marked the emergence of the three dominant cultures. These are Christianity, Islam, and the Germanic invaders. The literary forms dominant in this period are hymns, epic, poems, elegies, ballad, and narrative poems. Medieval literature um, has different characteristics. It is anchored on these following characteristics. First, it is focused on different religious beliefs. Religious values were not universal, and some traditions were in direct conflict with one another. Second, it was concerned with the use of physical force, meaning literature during this period was often associated with war and the life of commoners who experienced sufferings due to their lords' feuds. Third, it shows the lives of aristocracy. Since the Middle Ages is a time when feudal lords were showcasing their powers through their armies, the literature during this period showed the lives of aristocrats and knights. Finally, it shows the inconsistencies of chivalry, problematizing personal bravery versus group needs, and the individual working out his or her destiny. Here are the examples of medieval literature, or examples of literature in this medieval period. First is Beowulf. Beowulf was set in Denmark, which is the land of Danes and Sweden, also known as the land of Geats. It was a supernatural tale inspired by historical events. Beowulf, the hero of the story, was described as having a hand grip equivalent to the strength of 30 men, which enabled him to slay monsters. So another example in this period is the La Chanson de Roland, which is translated as the Song of Roland. It is an old French epic poem translated as the Song of Roland in English. La Chanson de Roland is considered the earliest and greatest chanson to Gest or French heroic poem. Finally, the Nibelungenlied, translated as the Song of the Nibelungs. The Nibelungenlied was a German epic poem, probably written in Austria during the early 13th century. The story has disparate elements because of its long history. Among these elements are the word Nibelung, which was used as the name of Siegfried's land and treasure in the first part of the poem, and as an alternate name for the Burgundians in the second part. So the next period that I'll be discussing would be the Renaissance literature, which is from 1300 to 1600s. The Renaissance period was marked by the rebirth of the Greco-Roman literary tradition. Classical scholars known as humanists revived and translated ancient texts. The humanists also used the Greek and Latin classics along with the traditional Christian thoughts, which is to teach people about human life. Humanism was rampant or among the intellectual in this Renaissance period. Humanism is the belief that people could attain earthly perfection. Each country experienced its own kind of renaissance, a renewed passion towards life and creative expression. During the English Renaissance, one of the greatest struggle of artists and writers was the need to earn and sustain themselves through their craft. Talented and creative individuals sustained themselves through the system of patronage. In this period, the printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg in 1440, is the greatest innovation of the Renaissance era, which resulted in a more cost and time-efficient production of literature. Next period would be the Age of Enlightenment from 1600s to 1800s. This period was a byproduct of the Renaissance that birthed humanism. This period could be summed up as the celebration of the different ideas. This made the cafe serve as the unofficial center of this new movement, a place where people would read whatever literature available and debate about their needs and desires as a community or a population. The Enlightenment was also the birthplace of many great thinkers who put their ideas into writing and made their thoughts available to historians of this century. Upheavals such as the French Revolution was a result of the people's idea that collectively the public can create change. It was the bloodshed in the French Revolution, along with the other upheavals, that made people reevaluate their ideas and led to the end of the Enlightenment period. These are the literature during the Renaissance and Enlightenment period. Um, First is Much Ado About Nothing. This was considered as one of Shakespeare's best comedies and was probably written between 1598 and 1599. It was the first printed as a quarto or a booklet in 1600 and reprinted in 1623 as a part of Shakespeare's first uh, folio, portfolio. This play infused humor in serious topics like honor, shame, and court politics. Next literature is Paradise Lost. This is an epic poem about the fall of man, where John Milton, the writer, made Adam, Eve, Satan, and God his character. What made this epic different from the version in the Bible is that it discussed more about the motives behind the events that occurred in the Bible. This epic stood out among its predecessors because of the fact that it was not about martial heroism. In this epic, there was no mortal hero to save a kingdom or win in a war. For Milton, it was all about spiritual heroism or Christian heroism. Finally, The Gulliver's Travel. In this novel by Jonathan Swift, Gulliver traveled on four separate voyages and encountered different types of societies each time. Each journey is a metaphor for different aspects of British society that the author wanted to criticize. Now, the next period would be the Romanticism. It is considered to have taken from the 1770 to 1830, a reaction against the Industrial Revolution. Writing about a nature was done as a way of reclaiming a life that was threatened by urbanization. It focuses on the emotions and expressions of man, showing originality and authority was highly valued at this period. Famous literary works during the Romantic period um, includes Emma by Jane Austen. Emma is a novel about a self-proclaimed matchmaker, Emma Woodhouse, who is responsible for the love match between her friends and male characters in the story. However, her character also had a realization that she is not really in touch with her own feelings and discovers this as the novel progresses. The next literature would be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Frankenstein is considered the first Gothic horror novel of the Romantic period. This one tackles the hunger of Victor Frankenstein to attain knowledge despite having everything. He experiences regret and horror as he created a monster based on his research and discovery. Last would be the Songs of Innocence and Experience by William Blake. This work by William Blake um, presents two points of view based on two separate books, The Innocence of Childhood and The Experience of Adulthood. It it showcases the hopes and dreams that young people have and how these hopes and dreams are realized as they become adult. Next period would be the Victorian, started in the reign of Queen Victoria, which lasted from 1837 to 1901. This period characterized by a decline in religious belief and novelist writing about the hopeless status of humanity in a modern world. This is seen through the lenses of realism. It used restrained language, unlike the carefree and emotional romantic period. So, examples or famous literary works during the Victorian period would be The Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens' work, A Tale of Two Cities, unabashedly presents the truth about revolution and poverty and shows how poor people thrive in a tough world. What makes Dickens' work popular to both the rich and the poor is that it exposes both the needy and the mighty in his works. On the other hand, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, uh, the autobiography of uh, Eyre or Jane Eyre is a story of finding love and at the same time a quest for a sense of belonging and value. Jane wanted to experience how it was to be accepted as who she is and be loved without losing her identity as an individual. Next period is Modernism period. This was in the early 1900s to 1965. So the First World War caused the formation of a new literary movement. There was a greater demand for all sorts of literature because of the higher literacy rate, which was quickly supplied by the popular press. In modernism, it also challenges the prevailing order during its time and focused on experimentation while self consciously breaking away the traditional forms. The literary techniques that were invented during this period of modernism includes imagism, which refers to the literary movement that focus on clarity and conciseness by using specific images. Another literary technique is the stream of consciousness. This is a technique in which a character's thought and feelings are written in an uninterrupted interrupted an, in, an interrupted flow. For example, foregoing literary devices such as a description and dialogue. Lastly, an unreliable narrator, a technique in a point of view in which the speaker may or may not know that his or her version of events is not entirely true. So, the last period would be the postmodernism, which is from 1965 up to present. It shows a crisis of identity of the human being in ethnicity and sexuality, as well as the struggle for social and cultural acceptance in a hypocritical society. These are the characteristics of postmodern texts. It includes the use of paradox or self-contradictory statement, use of fragmentation or incompleteness, whether in form or in content, and then the unreliable narrator. Um, Postmodern writers tended to avoid neat endings and championed chance over craft. Some of the literary techniques frequently used during this time were pastiche and metafiction. Literature during the modern and postmodern period includes this. Literary works during the modern and postmodern period includes In a Station of Metro by Ezra Pound. This is a poem. It is a perfect example of the use of imagism in poetry. In two lines, the poem can show a visualization in the reader's mind on what the poem would like to show in just a few words. Another example would be Waiting for Godot. This Godot. This play by Samuel Beckett is about two hovers waiting for Godot by a sickly looking fairy. The setting could best be interpreted as the place without Godot. It is also where the hovers contemplated and argued about hanging themselves. The play is true to the postmodern style of incorporating past literary movements as well as other influences from popular culture such as red-nosed circus clowns, traditional force routines, and James Joyce Finnegan's Wake. So that's all. I hope you take note of the important details because this will help you um, on answering the task that I assigned from your Google Classroom. So once again, thank you and see you again next week.